Welcome to another episode of The Alarmists. Today is a really special day. Well, they're all special, but this is really special. We have the great Stacy Widelitz. Who is Stacy Widelitz? Stacy Widelitz is a songwriter who has written one of the great iconic songs that we've heard in America called She's Like the Wind with his, at the time, best friend, Patrick Swayze. That's right, Dirty Dancing. Can you believe it? Dirty Dancing is now 33 years old, but we have not stopped listening to the music in this wonderful movie. And today we're going to talk about the history and the work that went in there and the great talents of Stacy Widelitz. Let's bring him on. Stacy Widelitz, welcome to The Alarmists.
Hello.
Hey, there he is. That is some, what is it, Platinum Records? My God.
Yeah,
Tell us what that is.
That's for the Dirty Dancing soundtrack, and that's where it maxed out on the Recording Institute awards. It's 11 times platinum.
Oh, so my God! Do they still make that?
Yes. Yeah,
they do.
But this represents 11 million records sold in the U.S.
Just 11 million.
Well, it's 42 million worldwide.
Well, first of all, it's amazing. You know, there are very few films that have left an impression as Dirty Dancing did. And it launched careers like Jerry Orbach became extremely famous. Patrick became extremely famous. You know, Jennifer Grey. I mean, it really launched careers. Dirty Dancing was in development hell, and it almost didn't get made. It wasn't even intended to be Dirty Dancing. When it was originally, the script that was originally being written, it was for Michael Douglas's movie, It's My Turn. Give the viewers a little history here of what went on and how it finally became a reality.
Well, by the time it was on my radar, it was set for production at that point. But I knew about the movie through Patrick, and then also had met Eleanor, the writer, at a barbecue at Patrick's place. And it was interesting because it was a low budget film. I think the budget was maybe $5 million at the most. And the word on the street, as it was nearing completion, was that it was terrible and that it was going to be in the theaters for a week and then go straight to video, because the production company was Vestron. It was their first theatrical release, and they were better known for home videos.
Wow. So this is like, you know, just that kind of bad publicity in the beginning is like instant death for most films.
It was interesting because I remember going to the cast and crew screening with my then girlfriend Wendy, who sings on the song.
Wendy Fraser, right?
Yeah, Wendy Fraser.
Right.
So we went to the cast and crew screening, and I remember walking out of there, turning to her and saying, "That wasn't nearly as bad as everybody said it was." I said, I thought it was actually pretty good. You know, a little cheesy in spots, but it was good.
But cheese is okay, you know, in a romance movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What romance movie isn't a little cheesy?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Now you had a long-term friendship with Patrick before the film became a hit. So talk to me about Patrick, because he was an incredible guy, and you know, I remember seeing interviews with him over the years, and he was a really personal, you know, somebody I believe from what I read, who he didn't get caught up in the Hollywood, you know, linchpin, as you might want to call it. Talk to me about Patrick.
Yeah, he was a very genuine guy. We met in his acting class in early 1983. A friend of mine who was another student in the acting class.
Who was the teacher?
A teacher named Milton Katselis. Mm-hmm. And the school was called the Beverly Hills Playhouse. It was also a theater.
So you were living out there then?
Yes, I had moved to LA toward the end of '81.
So was it an instant friendship? How did that friendship develop?
Well, what happened was we met in, this friend of mine brought me into the class to play piano for him for a scene that he was doing from the musical Shenandoah. And it turned into big discussion about musical theater with Milton and the other students in the class. There were probably about 60 students in the class, including a young Alec Baldwin. Tom Selleck was in the class.
And you were present during all this.
Yeah, I
Oh my
played.
God, what a window into the.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, Alec Baldwin, Tom Selleck, these are two guys that have managed to endure for 50 years, 40 years. Jeez.
And even Ronald Reagan's daughter, Patty, was in the class.
Patty,
So,
controversial Patty.
Yeah, so there were Secret Servicemen positioned outside.
Oh my God.
And
so what was that like? What was that like?
Well, it was, it was Hollywood. I mean, I had moved to LA and gotten to know some celebrities right away. The reason Wendy and I moved to LA from New York was we had written the theme for the Richard Simmons show.
Right. Who could forget Richard Simmons? I'm still traumatized.
I still have a Cuisinart that he gave me.
I keep looking at my body every morning when I wake up. Did I gain any weight? It's all because of that man.
Yeah, right. So, but anyway, so after the scene and the discussion, the class took a break and I was getting the music together to leave. And this guy came up to me with this kind of husky Texas accent. And he said, "Hi, I'm Buddy." Because that's how friends and family knew him, was as Buddy. And
Patrick's nickname was Buddy?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah. And that's what I called him, for all the time that I knew him. And I was looking, he said, "I really like, your discussion and all this and the playing." And I said to him, I said, "You look really familiar." And he had done a few things at this point. And so he said, "Have you seen The Outsiders?" And I said, "No." And then he mentioned a couple of other things. And I said, "No."
That's humbling.
Yeah, right. And,
that keeps the relationship grounded from the get-go.
Yeah. So I said, "It's not that type of familiar. It's like I've seen you around."
Right.
And then this blonde woman came over and he said, "This is my wife, Lisa." And I said, "I got it. The two of you are always working on a black 240Z on La Jolla Avenue on the weekends." And they said, "Yeah, how do you know?" And I said, "I live right around the block from you." And so we were two houses away from each other, two apartment buildings away.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
And so he and I and Wendy and Lisa, we all just started hanging out. They were interested because I had a background in dance, obviously not as a dancer, but as an accompanist with the Jose Limon Dance Company for a few summers. And so we talked about dance, we talked about theater, music, and all this.
So you were really in the early stages of the whole. I mean, because there hadn't been a film that had to do with dance that made it big since the Hollywood years. I mean,
Well, Flashdance.
Well, Flashdance, right? That was '83, right? '83,
yeah.
Right? So I guess it was starting to happen again. Yeah.
Right, and then in 1984, I believe it was, he was doing a movie called Grandview USA.
Mm-hmm. I remember it.
And he called me and he said, they're looking for songs for Grandview. I've had this idea for a song for a couple of years and I can't get anywhere with it. Do you want to work on it with me and maybe we can submit it to Grandview? So I said, "Sure, come on over." He lived around the block. So he came over with his guitar and I was at my piano and he played me, it was two chords over and over again, C to E minor. But the opening lines were intriguing, which was, "She's like the wind through my tree. She rides the night next to me." And then I didn't like the third and fourth lines. So he said a little defensively, "So what would you put in there?" So I said,
what are you going to do, Stacy?
Yeah. So it just came to me. I said, "She leads me through moonlight only to burn me with the sun."
Oh, great line.
And he said, "What does that mean?" And I said, "I don't know. Let's just write it down." So then I said, "It needs to go someplace musically." And so we expanded it. And over the course of a few days, we kind of knocked it out. And then the smart thing that we did was we did a really good demo of it with Buddy Patrick singing it, Wendy singing on it, I brought in a guitarist friend of mine, and I programmed all the synthesizers.
You still have the demo?
You know, I have it someplace in the house on cassette, of all things.
Oh God, you need to transfer that right away.
Yeah, I know.
That's history, man.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. But anyway, but it was ultimately rejected for Grandview, which turned out to be a very good thing. And it sat in a drawer for 2 years.
Now I was reading your history. So the song was rejected for Grandview, and there was another film that said it was rejected from. What was that?
I don't remember that film. I just remember it being rejected from Grandview and then being picked up for Dirty Dancing. So it's
You know what the odds are? Do you know what the odds are of getting a song in a film like that? Do you realize the great good fortune the almighty song God bestowed upon you?
Every day, believe me. I'm eternally.
What was your first reaction when you realized that? When was your aha moment when you realized, holy cow, I'm in this monster? You know, our song, and then it's with the lead actor, you know, singing it, and you collaborated. You're both songwriters. When was that moment when you realized that you had a piece of iconic film and music history?
Well, you don't get a sense of it being history until years later, when you realize it's still on the air. But the first moment, the guy that produced She's Like the Wind also produced Time of My Life, the other big single, a guy named Michael Lloyd. And it's a funny story. When we recorded the final version at Michael's studio, I was there, you know, and all the musicians are there, and Michael turned to me. He said, "Do you know what we're doing today?" And I said, "Yeah, we're recording She's Like the Wind." He says, "No, we are recording a major hit song. Mark my words."
So he knew already.
Well, and so I said to him, I said, "Will you call my mother and tell her? Because she still has doubts."
Why is it with us Jewish boys that mom always, you know, falls into the picture? I don't get it.
Well, it's because
gotta tell my mom.
Well, it's because, you know, as a kid, my parents would tell me, "You're smart. You can do anything you want." And then I said, "I want to be a musician." They said, "Accept that." You know, so it was
I had the same thing, you know, get a real job. I became a journalist, and it was like traveled around the world. And every week I'd hear the question. So, okay, it's nice that you get to go to France and you get to go to China, but when are you going to get a real job, Mom?
Yeah, right. But anyway, so the movie comes out, the album. Well, first the album was released and it tanked.
It tanked right away at the outset.
Right away. It just didn't even chart. And then Time of My Life tanked. But then the movie came out and they re-released the album and the song, and they shot up to #1.
How long a delay between when the album was released and the movie hit?
It was about a 3-week period.
Three of the most depressing weeks that you can remember?
Well, I tell you, it was completely off my radar by that point. I'd moved on to doing some score. I'd gotten picked up by a major agency. I was doing some scoring work. And it was like, okay, we have this song in this little movie, but, you know, cut to maybe a month, less than a month after the movie came out and the album was going crazy, Michael Lloyd called me and said, "Hey, you're getting a gold record for the soundtrack of Dirty Dancing, you know, representing 500,000 sales." And I was thrilled. I was like, I've never.
Was that your first one?
Yes. And
so you weren't a virgin anymore.
Yeah, right, exactly. So it was funny because about a week and a half later, I called Michael and I said, "When do I get the gold record?" He says, "You're not getting a gold record." And I said, "Why?" And he says, "Because now you're getting a platinum record."
Keeps getting better.
And so
did you have a moment with Patrick, you know, because you were still living around the corner from each other, right?
No, by that point, they had moved to a 5-acre ranch north of LA.
Oh, I remember that ranch in the Barbara Walters interview. Yep.
Yeah. And actually, I named the ranch.
No way. What did you call it?
Rancho Bizarro. And
That's so New York.
and it was
I
so,
use the phrase Mondo Bizarro.
yeah, but they actually had the, like when you enter a Texan ranch and it's up in metal, they
Right.
had that made and said Rancho Bizarro. And one of the biggest thrills was in the Barbara Walters interview to hear her say, "Here at Rancho Bizarro."
That's why they called her Baba Wawa.
That's right. That's right.
That's
So,
great.
so Michael, told me this startling news. And then Michael said to me, he said, it sold 280,000 copies last Sunday.
In one
And
day.
in one day. And
Do you
so,
realize what that means in today's standards? That's insane.
yeah, it just doesn't happen like that anymore.
No.
And
No.
so he said, we're riding a wave of something that none of us know where this is going.
Yeah.
And then
It's
the
a
next,
phenomenon. I remember
Yeah.
it even now. Yeah.
and then the next aha or moment of awe was the first time I heard it on my car radio.
Oh, of course. Every songwriter dreams of that moment,
Yeah.
driving down Ventura Freeway or the LA highway there.
I was actually on the crest of Crescent Heights when it turns into Laurel Canyon,
Oh,
and I was picking up a station from Anaheim, and it was at night, like 11 o'clock at night, and I start hearing this song, and it's like, oh my God, that's it. And
That's me.
Pulled the car over, and the thing is, I'd heard my music on the air before on television or in movie theaters, but there you're going to hear it.
Yeah.
The thing that's magic about a car radio is the randomness of it.
The spontaneity. Yeah.
Yeah.
And when did you first hear it after it became a hit with Patrick? Did you guys get a chance to have that moment together?
We had a hysterical moment where we were both going to the same dentist, Dr. Lewis. And the dentist, Roger, was a very funny guy, like a Beverly Hills dentist.
Right.
But he was a funny guy, and he had these two connected, exam rooms, whatever.
Right.
And
So you were in one and Patrick was in the other?
I didn't know he was there at the same time. So I'm loaded up with all the stuff in my mouth.
Oh my God.
Then Dr. Lewis opens up both doors, and we're looking through, and he's loaded up with all this stuff, and we're going, and then,
so you're all numbed out on Novocaine and they're playing your hit song?
well, what happened was it came on the radio in the dentist
God.
office by chance.
Oh my
So
God.
there's Buddy in one chair, and me in the other were going. So that was
That's
a
a great story. Oh my
yeah,
God.
that was a very funny moment.
Wow. Now you talk about that friendship. How did that? You met each other because you lived a couple of blocks away, but what a way to meet and then to be part of such an amazing success story. Talk about that friendship and what made it so special.
Well, I think we really bonded over the music. Plus, we did another project together in the mid 1980s, before Dirty Dancing. He and his wife and a third dancer named Nick Gunn put together a stage piece at the Beverly Hills Playhouse called Without a Word. And it was about the experience of being a dancer, and then for some reason, you have to leave dance and you have to shift your dreams. In Lisa's case, she couldn't stand the dehumanizing aspect of choreographers. In Patrick's case, his knees were messed up from high school football, so he was always in pain. And the third dancer, Nick, just simply got too old. And so it was a fantastic piece. And I wrote a bunch of music for it, and played live in it as well with synth and piano. We had a percussionist, MB Gordy, who was great. And it got a lot of notice. It won a bunch of.
So it's really great because what's really interesting about this is that you guys got to know each other on human terms. No fame, no fortune.
Right.
You really got to know each other before all that happened, because you know how fame and money changes everything.
Yeah.
So you had a grounding experience together that lasted years, and here you are suddenly with this phenomenon that if if it happens to any actor or musician or a songwriter, it's a miracle. So
Yeah,
that must have built that bond for you guys.
yeah. And the other thing was, I've never been starstruck. And so I was always also really honest with him. He, when you become a major phenomenon like he became, Us Magazine, Sexiest Man of the Year, this, sharks begin to gather in the
Oh
water.
yeah, opportunists. Yep.
Yeah. And it was very apparent. And so I tried to stay as down to earth with him. We had a joking relationship. He was actually had a very good, almost goofy sense of humor.
Uh-huh.
So we'd always have jokes with each other. And then also after Dirty Dancing, I had bought a house up in the mountains in Lake Arrowhead, outside of LA, which is a beautiful spot. And he and Lisa came up to visit, liked it so much that they came up to visit the next few weekends and then bought their own place up there.
So that's how they got their ranch, because of you. Wow, sort of gave the idea.
No, this was the mountain house.
Oh, the mountain house they got.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Wow.
so
you really had a big influence in their lives. So how did you know? I mean, so here, Patrick, first of all, one thing about Patrick that will always in my head be remembered is when he had pancreatic cancer, he was such a hero about his honesty about it, that
Yeah.
it brought such awareness to the disease that I think he did not only was heroic in the way he handled his demise that way, but also the awareness he created to bring more attention to what is really a death sentence when you get that disease. What was that like for you? I mean, were you able to stay close during that time?
Well, not to the, to the bitter end, but I'm really glad that I was in LA about a year or so before he died, and he and Lisa and I had dinner at their ranch, and that was great.
Did you know? Did you have a sense that it was the beginning of the end?
No, not really, because he was actually in really good spirits.
He was doing another show. He was doing a CBS show. Yeah.
Yeah, and he was always a philosophical guy. I think he was by nature kind of had a Buddhist outlook, and so he was resigned to what was happening, but was still fighting it as hard as he could.
Yeah, he was doing interviews during the TV show, and he was suffering so much, and he was still showing up for filming. I remember reading, and
Yeah,
he was really he died with such a fight in him and a gallant and with integrity. He really it lingers with me because we're like sort of like subject to what the media tells us, and for me to remember this all these years later, it's pretty impressive that it stays with me this much. Now they what do you call Patrick was a pilot, right? And Lisa too.
yes, they both had their high ratings. Like to be able to fly on instruments in bad weather, things like that. Lisa actually was surpassing him. She was getting into aerobatics. And
Aerobatics? You mean
yeah.
like spinning the plane? And
Yeah.
I think I'll take a pass. No. So what was it like going up with them? I mean, were you worried? Were you nervous? So you had total confidence?
There's one very funny story with that where at this point I was living in Venice, California, very close to the Santa Monica airport.
Next to Dennis Hopper?
Not too far, actually.
Oh, really?
So, yeah.
I did an interview with Dennis at his house many eons ago. He was a piece of work.
I can imagine. But anyway, so I was living with my then girlfriend, Karen Richmond, who's an actress, and didn't care for small planes. But Buddy called me, Patrick called me and said, hey, and he had just gotten his solo license. So he said, Lisa and I are renting a plane, and we're going to fly it out of, some airport up in the valley. And if you want, we can come down to Santa Monica Airport, land, pick you and Karen up, and we can fly up to Santa Barbara for dinner. And so
That
I
just
love,
sounds so good, you know?
yeah. So I said, well, I'm in. And it took a little convincing to get Karen to do it. She wasn't too thrilled about it, but I said, oh, the guy's this incredible athlete. He's obsessive compulsive. He'll, go through the checklist. So they flew down, they picked us up, and then we flew up to Santa Barbara. There was a car waiting there that took us to this restaurant, and we had great dinner. And now it's 11 o'clock. It's, nighttime. We're flying back to Santa Monica. And the Santa Monica airport is surrounded by streets and streetlights. And we're flying around, and we're on headphones so I can hear Patrick talking to Lisa. And I heard him very quietly say, I think that's the runway.
Not too
Karen gripped my
reassuring.
arm like this and said, did he say what I think he just said? And so I leaned in and I said, you're not going to land us on Ocean Avenue, are you? I mean,
Listen, I know a little deli around there. Can I stop in as we're passing?
yeah. So, we can go to Vito's. It's right there.
Oh my
And
God.
so finally they realized, okay, that is the runway, and we landed fine. And getting in my car, Karen just turned to me and said, never ask me to do that again.
Oh my God. No, you've gotten to you got a chance to really see things from a grounded view, which is pretty amazing when you look back now at the history of all this. And you have a history. Speaking of history, you have a history with some pretty iconic people in the music industry. Ray Manzarek, yeah, Glenn Frey, Quincy Jones. I spent a lot of time with Quincy at Montreux Jazz in the late 80s and early 90s when he was a co-producer with Claude Nobbs, the founder. Talk about those relationships.
Well, the closest relationship is with Jeff Skunk Baxter.
All right. I didn't mention Jeff, right, from the
Yeah,
Doobie Brothers and Steely Dan, right?
Yeah, still, oh, there you go.
There he is.
That's me when I look like Desi Arnaz. Oh, that's Karen. That's
Little Ricky.
Karen is sitting next to me. She was the one who was in the plane with me.
I can see from her face she could be nervous.
Yeah. So anyway, Jeff and I are still great friends to this day. But the Ray Manzarek story was fun because I was working on a TV show. I was still living in my apartment, actually. I was working on a TV show for NBC called Erie, Indiana.
I remember that.
Yeah, which is a show I loved because I could be really imaginative with the music and scoring the picture, which was actually my main business there. And my agent called me and said, I've got this guy sitting in my office who wants to learn something about scoring and how it works. And I figured while you're working on Erie, Indiana, maybe he can come and just sit in the room with you and watch you work. And he said he's more from the rock world. And I said, I don't know, Joel, I don't know about, somebody looking over my shoulder as I'm trying to work. It's such a solitary process. And I said, who is it? And he said, it's Ray Manzarek. So I said, Ray Manzarek of the Doors is in your office right now, and he wants to come over to watch me work. And I was a huge fan, especially of the second Doors album, Strange Days, which I think is a brilliant record.
Classic.
And I, had figured out as a kid all of Ray's organ parts and all that stuff. Anyway, so I said, yeah, he can come over. So the next day, I think it was, Ray Manzarek walks through the door of my apartment and watches me work for a while and is asking occasional questions about, how did I do this? And, I was doing some pretty complex stuff. So at one point I said to him, I said, let's take a break. I'll make some tea. So we went out into the living room and had some tea, and we're talking peer to peer. He was talking a little bit about the Doors movie, Oliver Stone's movie, and how he didn't like it, had his name taken off of it. But
what was his objection?
The depiction of Jim Morrison as like this dark knight. He said he was actually a really funny loving guy.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, we're talking, and I turned to him at one point and I said, "You have to give me 30 seconds." And so he said, "For what?" And I said, "Just give me 30 seconds." So he said, "Okay." So I looked at the floor and I said, "I can't believe Ray Manzarek is in my apartment. I can't believe Ray." And I repeated that about 5 times and then looked at him and said, "Okay, I'm done."
Yeah, I'm
So
done now. I'm done
I
now.
had to get the fan
And
element.
oh yeah, I also he's been pretty much the big survivor of that band. You know, he's every once in a while still pops into the headlines. You know.
No, he died a couple of years ago. He passed
No, but
away a
I'm
couple.
saying before you know, out of all the members of the band
Oh yeah, yeah.
that endured, he was always sort of maintaining a steady path. Well, you know, it's very hard. I mean, I was friendly, you know, like with the Jimi Hendrix band. You know, the Are You Experienced? You know, there so many of these great musicians. They knew nothing about business. They didn't know how to survive, and once
Yeah.
their moment was over, they fell by the wayside, and you never heard from them again. You know, so
Yeah.
like,
No, go on, go on.
yeah, I was saying, you know, before I forget, I know since we were talking about Jeff Skunk Baxter, this is a little asterisk in the history of TV annals. You guys wrote the Beverly Hills 90210 theme song?
Well, we wrote the original theme song.
Yeah, it didn't last very long.
No, it can only be seen on the pilot. And I think I'm pretty sure it's still on YouTube that you can pull that up. Yeah.
I bet it was hip.
What was really hip about it had a great saxophone part, and that was Edgar Winter on sax. So I got to meet and work with Edgar.
Edgar Winter had an apartment down the block from me on 87th in York. He lived in the penthouse of that building. I remember in the neighborhood every once in a while seeing an albino.
Yeah, yeah. He was very quiet, very intense, perfectionist in terms of. I think we retook his part like 50 times,
Wow.
but but yeah, what happened was Jeff and I wrote this theme again for this little show that nobody knew anything about, and Aaron Spelling, when the show debuted, hit the roof. He was the producer. He hated the graphics for the opening. So he fired the people that did the graphics, and in the process, he also just dumped everything from the opening, including our theme.
That must have sucked. Oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, you see how popular that, you know, how that, you know, that show became, and to realize that you were kicked off what was becoming a phenomenon, another phenomenon you were associated with, you know.
Well,
see, some of them work out and some of them don't, you know.
Yeah, what was good though is this one producer on the show, I think, felt bad about it, and he hired me to score a bunch of the episodes. So
Okay.
I still did the music for about, I think, 10 episodes in the first couple of seasons, including a very famous episode called "Isn't It Romantic," where Brenda and Dylan hook up for the first time.
Oh.
Yeah. And they actually they licensed "She's Like the Wind" for that. In one scene, Brenda's watching Dirty Dancing.
Oh, that's funny.
So I was sitting in what we call the spotting session, which is where you figure out where music is going to go. And one of the producers, Chuck Rosen, turned to me and said, "Oh, we're going to use that song that you wrote, 'She's Like the Wind.' Who do we contact about that?" And I said, "Me." So, because I was co-publisher on the song.
Wow.
So I was the one, you know, who had that control along with Patrick. So yeah.
You have a lot of talents. You ran for political office, I heard. You were
Yes.
in the political world after seeing after experiencing the Donald Trump era and having been a politician. Are you glad that you didn't make it your front and center?
Yes, it was a great experience, but it's funny because even though this was a small area, Oak Hill, with its own city government.
This is in Tennessee, right?
This is in Tennessee. Yeah,
right.
I ran for commissioner and won in 2016. So and I'd actually been on the planning commission for a couple of years already, which was funny. When I was approached to join the planning commission, I said, you understand I'm a college dropout composer and songwriter who knows nothing about stormwater runoff, and you're asked to join the planning commission. But it worked out, and I learned a lot.
And then you're a photographer also, right?
Yeah, that's been a relatively new and very surprising turn of events. You know, I always took travel photos, but in 2015, I went to Italy for the first time to attend a songwriting workshop as a student, because it was being conducted by Gretchen Peters, who's one of my favorite writers. And the whole retreat was put together by a friend of mine from Leadership Music, which is a great organization here in Nashville. And it was at a villa outside of Florence, so, you know, rough. And it included side trips and this and meals, and it was a fantastic experience. But about a week before the trip, I decided, you know what, I'm going to get a better camera than just using my phone or this cheap Olympus thing. So I bought this, you know, mid-level Sony travel camera with a built-in Zeiss zoom lens. And when I started playing around with it, I found out that it had this black and white function. So in Italy, I started taking pictures in black and white, and I started focusing on people, because I grew up loving classic street photography and old black and white movies. I'm still a nut for black and white movies.
Me too. I love them.
Yeah, and I posted a few of the photos to Facebook. And one of my Facebook friends is a really great photographer who lives around the block from me. And I was out walking my dog, and he pulled his car over and said, "Were you posting archival photos from Italy?" And I said, because they look old. And I said, if you mean the black and white stuff, I said, no, I took those photos. So he said, you took those photos? And I said, yeah. I said, why? And he said, well, you need to keep doing that because they're really good.
So you ended up doing a show, right?
Yeah, it turned, you know, I then took pictures in Cuba when I was in Havana and Washington, D.C. And anywhere I went now, I was wandering around taking photos. And I went back to Italy in 2018, back to the same villa. And also went to Lucca and Siena and all this. And when I got back from that trip in the spring of 2018, I decided to get a couple of photos professionally printed. So I asked my photographer friend where to go. He told me, and I got a couple printed like 11 by 17 on cloth paper, actually. Mm-hmm. And when I went to pick them up, the woman at the shop looked at me. I was stunned at how good they looked. And so she's looking at me. She said, "Did you take these photos?" And I said, "Yeah, why?" So she said, "These are really good. Do you have more like this?" And I said, "I have a ton now." So she said, "You need to buy a portfolio and start getting more photos printed out and build up your portfolio." So I did. And then I showed the portfolio to the artistic director of this space here in town called Oz Arts. And she looked through it and she said, "You need a show. You need a show on downtown on Fifth Avenue of the Arts," which is the main gallery strip.
Yeah, no, I know it well. Yeah.
And so I said, "You kidding?" You know, I said, "My own show?" And she said, "Yes." So I said, "Well, you know, I know Ann Brown at the Arts Company." So she said, "Go to Ann and show her. She'll be really honest with you." So I called Ann and told her what was happening, and she was a little dubious. And but I sent her a few photos by email, and she got back to me within an hour and said, "Impressive and in a very particular way." And so then we set a meeting, and she looked through my portfolio, and she looked at me, and first she said, "Tell me again how this happened." And so I said, "Well, basically, I bought a new camera." And so she said, "Well, what do you want to do now?" And I said, "Well, Lauren told me I should have a show, but I think that's a little, you know, outlandish at this point." So Ann just looked at me and says, "I'm going to do your show. I'm going to."
That's great. You know how hard it is to get into those galleries?
Yeah.
I mean, And Ken is texting me saying about a photo from East Berlin that you took. I spent a lot of time in East Berlin right before they knocked down Checkpoint Charlie forever and rebuilt the whole city. So you have a lot of photos from that era?
Not from wall coming down. I went to Berlin for the first time in 2019.
Okay.
I stayed half a block away from Checkpoint Charlie.
Yeah, I was in East Berlin a lot before they really started, before they had a massive construction site in the 90s. And I got to see where Hitler gave his speeches and all the, they basically erased history. It was very clever what they did. You would never know what was there,
Well, a lot of it was bombed into, rubble anyway.
Right.
But
the
yeah.
church is still there. The church that managed to survive during all those bombings is still there. It's a symbol of the past, Yeah, photographs. I did a photo show as well. I've been to China 16 times, and I did an amazing at the Grant Street Gallery on Mercer Street. It's no longer there, but if you Google it, you can find it. These pictures were, I used a Pentax point and shoot 300 millimeter lens, and like you said, faces. I captured, I went to areas like Dali, which I discovered was a blue zone. I discovered a group that were all 95 to 110 and still wearing the old mouse uniforms. Photography is, Jacques Lowe, the Kennedy photographer, was my mentor. He was a great friend, for the last 10 years of his life. And I always thought of myself as a journalist who was a documentarian. And he elevated it to the next level for me. So, it's great. You have so many talents, Stacy. My God,
Yeah, but when am I going to get a real job? So
you sound like my 90-year-old mother. When are you going to get a real job? Yeah, we're in the real world and we're doing the real job and we're living the life. Right, here you go.
Yeah,
Stacy, thank you for coming on The Alarmists. This was an engaging conversation, and thank you for sharing a little bit of your history and giving the viewers a little peek to what Patrick Swayze was like. And thank you so much. I hope you'll come on again.
Absolutely.
The Alarmists, Stacy Widelitz. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.